Of Arizona death row inmate Deborah Milkey, 49 years old, has spent the last 22 years in prison. She was convicted of murder, child abuse, and kidnapping in one of the notorious crimes in Arizona history. But lingering questions about the lead detective in this case could allow Milkey to walk off death row and into a life of freedom. Christopher Milkey was just 4 years old. In 1989, he was told he was going to see Santa. Instead, two men, friends of Deborah Milkey, drove him to the desert and shot him 3 times in the back of the head, allegedly on her orders. The plot, as outlined by prosecutors, was all about cashing in on the boy's $5,000 life insurance policy, and Milkey was convicted of first-degree murder. She's been on death row for 22 years, but in March, an appellate court overturned that conviction.
All I can tell you is I was so elated I could hardly even think.
Attorneys Mike Kimmerer and Lori Vopel have been fighting for Deborah Milkey's release. She has always maintained that she had nothing to do with Christopher's death. Her conviction was based largely on the testimony of a former detective, Armando Saldate, who said Milkey confessed to him.
She then manipulated 2 other gentlemen to get rid of the child, and they got rid of the child and made up a story that he had gotten lost at a mall.
But Detective Saldate had a history of misconduct that the prosecution failed to disclose.
The court's opinion makes it very clear that they are very unhappy with the detective's conduct in this case.
According to court documents, Saldate never read Milkey her rights, and the state of Arizona never disclosed that Saldate had a long history of lying under oath. While Milkey's ex-husband, Christopher's father, believes she is guilty of murder, he also believes that Saldate botched the investigation, never even recording the alleged confession.
He was ordered to tape record that. He flew off in his little helicopter, didn't even take a tape recorder with him. Didn't even plan on tape recording it. He was going to tell it the way he was going to tell it.
And now, that story is getting national attention, forcing the DA to take another look at the evidence that could set Milkey free. We're going to talk about that evidence. Also, were Deborah Milkey's rights violated? And was that detective out to get her? Deborah Milkey, death row inmate convicted of plotting the murder of her 4-year-old son, could walk free next month. An appellate court has now overturned the conviction 22 years after the crime due to a shady detective. I want to take you live to Phoenix now. Mike Kimmerer, he represents Deborah Milkey. Mike, is it true? Could she walk free as early as a month from now?
It could conceivably happen within a month. There's still several steps that have to be accomplished here, but it's possible that in 1 month she could be free.
Do you believe she's innocent?
I totally believe she's innocent. Deborah Milkey never committed this crime.
And what leads you to believe that, considering the evidence that has been laid out over the past 2 decades?
Well, the only evidence really when you get down to anything of any significance at all was her so-called confession that Saldate claimed that he obtained from her. She, from day one, the minute that people said she even confessed, or minutes afterwards said she never confessed at all. Saldate had a long reputation here of the cop that could go out and get confessions from people. In this particular instance, he was even ordered to take a tape recorder and record the conversation. He had his partner there. He wouldn't even let his partner be in the room to be present when he got the so-called confession. He didn't take any notes of the confession. And when they went to trial, the only evidence that was of anything that really connected her to the case was this particular confession that Saldate claimed that she had made.
So, Judge,
now, there's character evidence and things like that, but nothing of any type of direct evidence.
All right, well, Judge, let me get you to weigh in, because obviously for more than 2 decades, the son's father thinks she's guilty and that she conspired to kill her 4-year-old son for this $5,000 life insurance policy. What are your thoughts about if indeed this botched detective, his credibility is thrown under the bus and she's set free? Is it possible We've got a killer.
My understanding of the court's ruling was that the defense had asked for all exculpatory evidence that was in the government's possession at the time of trial, and what the government did not turn over to the defense was evidence that this particular detective was found to have manufactured confessions in 8 other criminal cases, and that those criminal cases had been overturned. That was some pretty heavy evidence that the defense should have been allowed to argue to the jury that this person that you're believing has already been found to lie at least 8 times in other people's cases. So I do believe, as her defense attorney just said, that this conviction is probably going to be overturned. There is no other corroborative evidence. Not even notes from this detective. I mean, most people can't remember what somebody told them last week. And he's going to remember what somebody told him 22 years ago. Now his credibility is at issue, and I do believe we may see her walk free.
Well, let me ask the attorney then why is this little 4-year-old boy dead? And let me take that to you, Mike.
That's a good question, and a lot of us have thought about what was the reason here. It's no question that the 4-year-old boy was killed by either Scott or Stiers. At the time Deborah was living with Stiers, she was getting ready to leave Stiers' apartment. She had gotten a good job. She found an apartment of her own. I personally believe that probably Stiers didn't want her to leave. He had a romantic interest in her, wanted her to stay, and I believe felt the child was in the way. I think that was the thing that precipitated the child's death. But Deborah had nothing to do with it, and certainly wouldn't have precipitated it.